The Boogeyman, directed by Rob Savage, who also directed Host and most recently Dashcam, which wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed Dashcam for the most part, and it came out like a couple of years ago. So the story here follows a high school student named Sadie Harper and her younger sister Sawyer, who are still mourning the recent death of their mother. They're not getting much support from their father, Will, a therapist who's dealing with his own intense pain of losing her as well. When a desperate patient suddenly shows up at their house seeking help, he leaves behind a terrifying supernatural entity that preys on families and feeds on the suffering of its victims. Alright, so the story of The Boogeyman 2023 basically expands upon the story from the original Stephen King's The Boogeyman adaptation from 1982. The story has changed and warped also, but allow me to get you guys up to speed so you don't have to go back and read the short story or go back and watch the original short film adaptation from 1982, unless you'd like to, in which case you should probably skip this next part, because I'm going to give you guys a rundown of where the story was and kind of where they're going now. Alright, so the original Boogeyman is a chilling short story by Stephen King, originally published in 1973 as part of his Night Shift collection of stories. The narrative follows a man named Lester Billings, who visits a psychiatrist to share his harrowing experience involving the deaths of his 3 children to what official reports list as crib deaths, and he claims that the Boogeyman did it. His children all became frightened of the monster in the closet, but he ignored their tears, hoping to toughen them up by leaving them in the dark, which probably wasn't a good idea. As the story progresses, it becomes evident that the Boogeyman is not a figment of the children's imagination, but a malevolent entity that actually exists. Each time Lester tries to comfort his children to investigate the source of their fear, tragedy strikes, and one by one his children are claimed by the creature, and it also torments him for reasons he can't fathom. During his sessions with the psychiatrist, he confesses his fears, guilt, and nagging feeling that he is responsible for the children's deaths, and the sessions progressively get deeper. The psychiatrist, Dr. Harper, strongly advises him to schedule future therapy sessions, so Lester goes to schedule more with his assistant, who I believe is away on break at this time. When he returns to Dr. Harper's office, unexpectedly, he finds out to his horror that Dr. Harper has been the Boogeyman all along. The film also suggests that the Boogeyman is a figment of Billings' imagination also, and that he himself killed his children through neglect and abuse, but that's just another possible theory, and the film doesn't actually say this. What it shows visually and what it displays to us, the audience, is that the Boogeyman is Dr. Harper. But it's just like a psychological theory that a lot of people believe, and the film also suggests this as well. But in that way, things are sort of left a little ambiguous. Now, like I've already said, the original story is quite old, so that was just me getting you guys up to speed, but I would not say that the original story is needed to enjoy the 2023 version as a standalone film. But if you consider yourself to be a fan of Stephen King's work and this movie sounds intriguing to you, which I believe it would be if you're watching this review, then I personally think to appreciate the full experience, I think it would be important to go back and see where the origin of where this story came from. But that's just my personal opinion. Plus, on top of that, I would say that the 2023 version is more of a requel. It reboots some aspects of the original story, but on top of that, it's more of a continuation of what was already established in the original story. But without beating around the bush much longer, I gotta say that I really enjoyed this movie. And I can honestly say that I truly have a strong appreciation for it after reading Stephen King's short story and then watching the 1982 short film adaptation. From what I can remember, I don't think the film had any gaping holes in the logic, or any major plot holes that broke the continuity of any previously established story points. I honestly think everything made as much sense as it could, given the supernatural nature of the movie, you know. And I think the last good, solid Stephen King adaptation, in my personal opinion, was Dr. Sleep. Since then, Children of the Corn, Firestarter, and Mr. Harrigan's Phone have been completely trash. I did a review previously on Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and I don't think I said it was completely trash, but now that I think back on it, it was just okay, but the other two were definitely completely trash. I can tell that for the most part, The Boogeyman was carefully crafted. The story for this film was written by Scott Beck and Bryan Woods, who both also co-wrote A Quiet Place Part 1 and 2 alongside John Krasinski, and they wrote Haunt and 65, which none of these are movies with terrible stories, I mean, if we're being honest. But of course, the major highlights here for them are A Quiet Place Part 1 and 2. I think these guys did a great job though. I think it's a solid horror film, and I really wish that it was rated R personally. It seems to me that they could have had a lot more freedom with that rating. Creatively, they could have done a lot more that would have just made this movie a horror masterpiece in my personal opinion. But I think they were pretty clever in the way that they used their PG-13 rating with this particular movie. Now, although the monster design isn't super unique and the story itself is fairly cliche, I would say that this film is different enough to where you can at least watch it and enjoy it. I mean, the Harper family in the film is quite devastated after losing the mother of the house. The father is having a tough time too, and he's unable to even talk to his own kids about the loss of their mother, and he's a therapist. But of course, I would assume even as a therapist, it's easier to help people with their problems than dealing with your own shit. That's just my guess. Then we have Sadie, Will's oldest daughter, who's played by the chick from Yellow Jackets. I forgot her name. Then it's his youngest girl named Sawyer, who's at the highest risk of possibly being killed by the monster, mainly because it feeds on those who are pretty much weak mentally. They're going through depression. You know, it's a monster we've seen before who come after people in this way. I think the Babadook, just off the top of my head, might seem like the most similar monster as far as being grief and feeding on those who are depressed, you know. But just like most horror films, they have to do some digging to find a way to defeat this monster. And for the most part, I personally think that this journey is paced well. And I think it's a film that's worth checking out, especially if you're looking for a high quality horror film. And it's an even bigger plus if you're already familiar with the source material. So if you're just casually walking into this film and you're just looking for a good, solid, standalone horror film, I think you'd probably give this movie like a 7 or less. But if you're already familiar with the source material, then I think you're going into this movie with a better idea of what to expect. And in that regard, I think you would probably give it an 8 or better. And that's my own personal score for this film as well, because I really enjoyed it. So if this sounds interesting and it sounds like a movie that you might actually enjoy, then The Boogeyman releases in theaters next Friday, June 2nd. So yeah, go check that out. But there you have it. And if you guys enjoyed the content, then as usual, you know what to do. Thank you for watching.